Welcome to Media Tech Talk. I'm David Richards.
And I'm Paul Luckett. In a world where advertising is powered by algorithms and automation, few people understand or help build the systems behind it all. We have one of those people on our show today. From architecting Google's ad servers, establishing the VAR standard, founding Beeswax, and launching Marketecture Media, a platform that explains the technology driving our industry, Ari Paparo has shaped the business of digital media.
His book, Yield, reveals how Google's rise redefined the ad tech economy. Stay with us as we go behind the code and into the mind of one of ad tech's true innovators. Ari, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry. I'm used to being a podcast host. I got it backwards. Thanks for having me.
It's so random to have you on. Yeah, it's so random to have you on. I'm used to listening to you as I'm at the gym on the treadmill and doing some weights. So to have you here in person is quite a special experience.
Yeah, we should do like a joint treadmill podcast. Try not to run out of breath. We interview each other.
Yeah, that'd be great. Now, you've been called one of the... I don't know where to go with that one. Now, you've been called one of the architects in ad tech. How does that come about, and what inspired you to come into the industry?
Yeah, sure. So I needed a job, to be frank. It was so post.com bubble. Things were pretty bleak in advertising, but also everywhere in New York. And frankly, I got a job at DoubleClick, and DoubleClick at the time was not the best company. It was publicly traded, but was kind of at the low. Stock was down like $5, and the strategy made no sense. And the ad server was like in a back room covered in dust while the management was investing in all kinds of shiny new toys and stuff. I was just happy to have a job. And it turned out that my timing was pretty good because I guess that was 2004. And from like the exchange world hadn't even been thought of really. But from 2004 to like 2010, 11 was kind of the inception of many of the most exciting things in ad tech. And the one thing I did that's, certainly going to be on my tombstone obituaries, I created the VAST standard. So, one of the things that developed during that time, besides programmatic, was video. And I, in my position at DoubleClick, realized we had an opportunity to set a standard because we were the biggest player. And that's one of the areas where having clout actually helps everybody, because we were able to build it out, establish it, get the IP to adopt it. And, I'm pretty proud that it's still used for, tens of billions of dollars of transactions per year.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was part of the startup team here at Daevid in Australia, and my role was bringing publishers into the vendor space and getting them certified across VAST and VPAPE was a big part of my role. Look, obviously fundamental in the way that we operate in the video advertising space.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, it's kind of an interesting sub-story, which is that my day job was buy side. It was DFA, DoubleClick for advertisers, now called Google Campaign Manager. And so when I was working on VAST, it was very self-interested on the agency side. It was agencies wanted interoperability with video players across publishers, similar to what you did at Daevid. But the reality was that after we created VAST for several years, the buy side had no involvement whatsoever. It was all ad networks and interoperability of Yield on the sell side. That was why VAST got adopted. And it took a while, but then the buy side came along.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You must be pretty proud of those achievements because even with at Google and AppNexus, you helped design RTB or real-time bidding architectures. What convinced you that automation and data would become the backbone of media trading?
I didn't have that much to do with it.
Oh, come on.
I didn't. I had a pretty important role at AppNexus. I was there for about 2 years, but it was much more about sort of the management side of things. So AppNexus was sort of like a wild place that had no strategy and was just doing whatever they thought on a given day. And so I had sort of a calming influence. I was the oldest person who worked there at the time, as I was all 40. So the rails had been set by O'Kelly and the other founders as programmatic, RTB, maybe the first RTB provider, unclear exactly. And what was changing was how it was scaling to people like agency trading desks and publishers direct, with yield management. Because the early days of programmatic right after Right Media and DoubleClick first entered the market was all about ad networks. It was about getting your ad networks to optimize better in your ad server. And that's not, frankly, a very interesting topic today. If we look back on it, it was like, all right, a little remnant inventory, a couple extra pennies here and there. It got interesting when the buy side got involved and brands got involved. And that's kind of the meaty part where I probably played a role.
Yeah, it's probably a good segue.
Everything you're saying is kind of taking me back to like where I started, because when I first got exposure to all these things, like when the company that me and David met at, Census Digital Media, we were migrating from Atlas Ad Manager across to DFP back in 2011, 2012. And then started integrating the early AppNexus back in those days. And it's funny, like the word ad network still gets thrown around quite a lot these days, right? Like, I see like the memes all the time, like looks like the ad network is back. Like, do you think that's a thing? Or
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article in Ad Age, the publication years ago, called like "Let 1,000 Ad Networks Bloom," and I stick by that article. It's still available if you search for it, which is that there's nothing inherently wrong with the ad network model. It's actually a really good way to monetize data and not share the data. So a lot of times the critics of our industry say we're all selling data, everyone's selling your data, but actually, if you don't sell it, if you keep it, it's pretty clean, and it allows you to just produce better outcomes through media. And that was kind of the trade-off that people had for many years. And people would say to me, like, I have all this data, but I don't really want to create an ad network. That sounds too hard. But the reality is that, pretty much every television manufacturer, every phone manufacturer, every major retailer, obviously every media company, they all are operating in some form ad network models because it's a good business model.
I kind of miss the days of working in ad networks. I think my role back when I met Paul was looking after about 50 different publishers, both locally and from overseas. And it was almost a bit of the Wild West, where we had publishers coming in from the US that didn't really know how the Australian market operated. And there's so much trust that they gave us, but a responsibility at the same time, because it was all based on revenue returns. But the technology, as Paul said, was just, it's all very experimental and still, it's sort of moving out from the old days of performance-based campaigns that didn't use programmatic. So it's just,
Yeah, I think that I think there was a sort of golden age of the ad networks, which was like from, let's call it the .com crash of 2001 to 2006 when programmatic started getting adopted. And that gives it kind of a bad reputation, because these people like advertising.com, Blue Lithium, InterClick, et cetera, they really were just middlemen. They had nothing proprietary. They would buy data from somebody, buy media from somebody else, then try to maximize their margin while keeping everyone else at bay. And, it was valuable at the time because there was no liquidity because of ad exchanges. So that was the best way to get performance across publishers. But it wasn't really a value add to society, let's say. It was a middleman. And as soon as programmatic got scaled, the buy side took that over and said, oh, you know what? If I want performance, I'm going to go to a DSP and control it myself and have some control over the amount of margin that's taken out of every dollar.
Yeah. Probably a good segue actually into Beeswax. When you founded Beeswax, you created the world's first bidder as a service. How did the idea originate, and what technical breakthrough made it viable for you?
Yeah, sure. So I started in 2014. It started because I kept being asked the exact same question. And at the time, I sort of was out of ad tech a little bit at a different job. And I was, out of AppNexus, and people kept coming to me and saying like, hey, I was thinking about building a bidder. The number of people who said that to me was just extraordinary. And it was almost always because they had an ad network model in mind of some kind, but also there were really big buy-side clients like, Netflix and eBay and others who were building bidders or thinking about building bidders. And I knew that the options weren't good. Building it from scratch, which what most of these people did, was like easily $1 million and usually failed. AppNexus was an important company in the space, but they'd say you could do that, but it was really hard. Like, it just wasn't delivering on what customers wanted in that regard. And then the other option was there were like companies like IP on Web or, Sigma software. They're like kind of hybrid custom development shops, which was definitely better than building it yourself, but it's still expensive and time consuming. And anyway, so I said to myself, like, why can't I offer a cloud-based bidder where it's like an Amazon service where you could just turn a bidder on for people? And then I started saying, well, if you did that, then I'd also have to, get all the supply and data in there. And then, after a little bit, I was able to kind of diagram out how this would work. The early version of my pitch deck and my idea was that the bidder itself would be open source, and we would just deploy it, like I said, in a container in Amazon. That didn't actually happen. We ended up building our own bidder. But other than that, the idea and business model was exactly what I said it would be, which is you get a bidder in the cloud. You can do whatever you want with it. And it's as if you built it yourself, but it starts, our first price was $7,500 a month. And it went up from there. So our entry level price ended up something like $10,000 a month, which was a really good deal if you were thinking about building a bidder. Now, the problem with that business model was, first, there weren't that many people that wanted to build a bidder. Like, it was more than 5 or 10, but it wasn't like 1,000, right? So the addressable market turned out to not be as big as I'd hoped. And secondly, if you were not planning on building a bidder, there was no way to convince you should, right? Yeah. It was already like, so our market were people who had this delusion they needed a bidder, and those people loved us. But like, you couldn't go to anyone. I never convinced a single person who was not already building a bidder to go ahead and build one. Yeah. So that was kind of challenging.
So how do you get investors involved? Obviously, if the market is where it was when you were building this, how do you get the investors in?
Yeah, well, my founding team was me, and I had a good reputation. I recruited 2 co-founders, Shamim and Ram, who stuck with me the whole time, who were straight out of Google and had amazing resumes, one in product, one in engineering. So the founding team was, pretty easy to raise against, we raised like $1.3 million just on a PowerPoint, which was, it sounds small. It maybe was a little small. I probably could have gotten 3 or 4 on a higher valuation, but it was my first time raising. So we got 1.3 million on the PowerPoint. We ultimately, over several rounds, raised 28 million. And we don't disclose the amount we sold for, but it was a good exit for everybody.
It's a bit like the $1 billion you're asking for Marketecture Media.
Yeah. Anyone wants to buy Marketecture for $1 billion, I will send you my Venmo.
Yeah, awesome. And fast forward, actually, for Marketecture Media, it's a media platform rather than a software company. What inspired the shift, and what problem were you trying to solve with this at the time?
Yeah, so I left. So Beeswax got acquired by Comcast. I left in 2021. I wanted to start something new. I'll kind of simplify the story, which is, I found, probably you folks have found too, that ad tech is filled with BS. It's just so hard to tell what these companies actually do, even after you read their website.
I call them good sales pitches.
They're bad sales pitches. If they're good sales pitches, I would know what they did. But it's like, how many ad tech websites are like, we bring together demand and supply to provide outcomes? Yeah. It's like, what does that mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So the initial business model was paywall based, that was interviews with not just me, but several other sort of certified experts. And we would basically do a vendor interview. We'd find out, what do you do? Why should we care? How much does it cost? Who buys it? And then we put it behind a paywall. And that still exists, and we have many subscribers for that. And then what we found was, not surprisingly, that like people wanted a little more like current info. They wanted to wake up, go to the gym, and hear what Marketecture has to say. And that wasn't really the format we had at the time. So I started my podcast every Friday with Eric Franchi from Aperium Ventures, and it's a traditional podcast format. We have a guest, we do the news. And it got pretty popular, right? Because it's interesting, and no one else was covering ad tech in that level of depth. Obviously, Ad Exchanger has their big news podcast, which is great, but ours was a little punchier and fun. And one thing led to another, and then I acquired Ad Tech God, a meme account. I acquired another site and another site. I've done 6 acquisitions, and now suddenly I have a little mini media empire.
It's amazing. Now,
is Media Tech Talk for sale? Do you want do you want me to vet?
No, that's good. Ad Tech God, another podcast I love listening to. The mystery around who the host is. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll say three things, which I tell everyone. First of all, it is a real person.
Yes.
Second of all, I know who it is.
Yeah.
Third is it is not me.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that. Now, to be remiss
Is it
of
like
me.
the Stig from Top Gear where he's like always got a mask on and you can't actually tell who he is?
Oh, yeah.
You know, we do internally, all the employees know who he is, but when we do external calls, he has to put a voice disguiser on.
We're actually going to sit outside the office and try and figure out who it is now.
Yeah, sure. The office is my apartment, so you might think it's my wife.
Now, to be remiss of me to not ask this question, because Natalie Delpierre, my boss at News Corp, we're always constantly amazed at how many businesses you guys are investing in. How does that come about? And have you got a number? Especially with Eric, I think you're always making some statement.
Well, I'm an LP with Aperium. I'm not a primary investor with Aperium. So Eric's a GP, so he runs it. So yeah, they have a lot of deal flow. They're doing great. I'm pretty happy to be an investor in them. There are a lot of companies in ad tech broadly situated that are looking for funding. I get pitched probably once a week by someone I've never met before who's doing something I've never heard of before. And it's sort of like mash it together. It's like digital out of home plus AI for media agencies, whatever. Just you could kind of, play bingo and like there's probably a company doing that. Definitely a lot of AI pitches, a lot of out of home, a lot of podcast tech. It's a little unclear if any of those will end up working out. I've been pretty public about my support of Vibe, which is, CTV for small businesses. It's a competitive market, but that's an area where the whole sector is blowing up. Everyone is involved with it, is doing really well. Vibe just announced a giant Series B. So, ad tech is not dead. It's a pretty thriving startup ecosystem.
Yeah, look, I think ad tech's going to. Sorry, Matt. I was going to say just quickly. I think ad tech's going to become more of a central player in publishers and in the media space as a whole, and more than it is now. Probably has been actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Google is forced to divest, which I think is going to take a while and probably unlikely, but Google stepping back is good for innovation in ad tech.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about on the investment side of things. Like, do you think, it seems like every company these days, tech companies especially, has an AI pitch or some part of their deck that touches on that. I mean, when I was in Adweek last week, which is great to see you there. I think as I walked around the vendor space, every single display had the word AI on it somewhere. Mm-hmm. Do you think that like AI and like there's investment fatigue around that yet, or is there still a lot of interest?
I think you need to be able to convince investors that your AI is a standalone business. And I'm pretty skeptical because especially if you're only touching one piece of the value chain and you're not creating models, obviously. The big model companies are billion-dollar companies. So it seems very reproducible. Like if I do, the best example would be creative. Like if you wanted to whip up a, AI generated creative resizing company, is that like, it's less than a week of work to build that, right? And then why wouldn't, Celtra build that? They're already in the creative business, or Adobe, or every single SSP or DSP. What's the business model that makes that sustainable? And I think you could say that for media planning. You could say that for optimization. You really have to come in with some hook that's either unique data that feeds the AI or some other reason why it's going to be a sustainable business. I think like we've only really seen one ad tech AI acquisition, as far as I know, which is Magnite bought Streamer. What's it called? They bought a video AI company. And I think that's a pretty good example. First of all, because it is sort of an acqui-hire. I mean, basically, it was Magnite has an existing position and they want video AI in it. Okay, so they could have built it, but they bought it to speed development. So that's great, but it's not $1 billion exit. And then the second thing is like, I think that the company they bought was not just doing creative. They were doing creative plus media. So it was basically an ad network, which proves that it all works and that you have that feedback loop. I think that's definitely part of it, is like the more of the value chain you're doing using AI, the more valuable you are.
Yeah, I see dynamic creative being a really big part in the way that we're delivering ads, specifically around the introduction of more screens, augmented as well, which we haven't really played a big part in yet. Do you see that happening as well?
You mean like augmented reality,
Or
VR type things?
I think dynamic creative in its all. I think personally, and I'm happy to hear what you've got to say on this. I think dynamic creative and optimization across different screens is going to be where the market's going to lean in towards more.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Historically, dynamic creative hasn't been a great spot for startups either. Who's the biggest dynamic creative company in history? It's easily Criteo, right? And because Criteo is an ad network that has dynamic creative as a tool they use, I don't know if there's been a single big dynamic creative company as a standalone, right? It's usually bundled with media or bundled with ad serving or something like that. And I think that's still going to be the case. I wouldn't do, even if you had some cool tech that made the creative different on different platforms, I don't see it as a sustainable independent business.
Do you think Adobe could go down that path with their content management solutions that they have, obviously with Adobe Advertising?
Yeah, totally. Like Adobe probably has a good position there. I think it's interesting to see what the big guys are doing because both Google and Meta are leaders in AI right now. Like both of them have said publicly that there's in the tens or hundreds of millions of media that's flowing through their system that's using AI that dwarfs what anybody else is doing by quite a way. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a play to continue being a feeder of creative or analytics into those systems, or if the systems become so self-reliant that independent startups can't break in.
I want to lean into some of the technology opportunities and insights that you've gained over the last, obviously your working career. Luckett, there's been a whole stack of insights that you've collected as well whilst you've been working in media ad tech. What are your thoughts?
Regarding like what tech is like fundamental tech.
Yes.
AI certainly. I mean, obviously, AI is the biggest deal right now. I'm not going to be able to prognosticate exactly how AI is going to affect what the business we're in. Like, we'll call it open web ad tech, whatever you want to call it. I don't love that phrase, but using better phrase. But I'll start with this. I just gave a presentation about this earlier today, which is like the days of looking at a screen and having like 16 fields you need to fill in with naming conventions and a little guidebook on how to train junior employees on filling in the fields correctly. That's gone. Like if you're a vendor, a DSP or an SSP or a data provider, and you're asking people to fill in these really big, error-prone, complicated screens a year from now, what are you doing, man? It's just not the way we should be doing things. Humans aren't good at that. Machines are. You should be able to put in a prompt or upload a PDF of what your client wants and have it just all work. That's just the easy stuff, the workflow stuff. I've been spending a lot of time with looking at some of the proposals. So Brian O'Kelly, the founder of AppNexus, is out there with this whole agentic ads proposal, which is super interesting. He paints a vision where a buyer agent and a seller agent are going to negotiate media and close deals together. I'm pretty skeptical around that, but that not around the whole initiative, just around like the actual consummation of the transaction. When you think about like complementary ad stacks, I think that AI will absolutely dominate. So complementary meaning like creative plus DSP is a combination where the same customer wants both to work better together. You can have an AI maybe go into Claude and say, let me know of all the creative formats that are not currently uploaded into the Trade Desk that I need for this media campaign, and then tell Celtra to upload them to the Trade Desk. Like that's within our grasp, that sort of workflow. Or segments to SSPs. Like let's say you're using a SSP that has a curation platform like Index Exchange, and you're a LiveRamp customer, right? Having those two systems cooperate is really valuable. You can start saying once again in a chat interface like, "Hey LiveRamp, get me my 20 most performant segments, put them in a Boolean or create a private deal in Index Exchange and send me back the ID so I can put it into the Trade Desk."
Yeah.
You just save like how many hours of time?
Oh.
Right?
Mad. And I think, Lenny, looking at what Microsoft announced a couple of weeks ago, where they're looking at AI in their, I know Xander's been retired from the DSP perspective, but just moving traders out of that and making decisions, or even setting campaigns up and having it all automated. That's a big move into that direction as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I think being able to optimize with more signals. This also goes to some of those like walled garden privacy issues where, if Microsoft sees its future of driving demand to its owned and operated, to Xbox and LinkedIn and things like that, they want less and less of that data available to buyers. They want it to be closed. And AI is part of that, but also, not enabling the inventory to be bought on DSPs is another part of it.
Just touching on one of the previous questions. So I guess working at News Corp Australia as head of ad tech for a long time, and previous publishers, the ad tech sector on the publisher side has evolved quite a lot with header bidding and a lot of the other things that are coming along the line. And in the publisher side, we've pushed the tech stack quite far, especially at News Corp Australia. Would you say that is there an inflection point where some sort of like structural change or revolution rather than evolution is coming? Are we at that point yet? Is that coming down the line, and if so, what do you think would be the thing that really kicks off that real like structural revolution in the tech stack?
Yeah, on the publisher side, we've roughly had the same tech stack for 10 years. It's been pre-bid plus GAM. And there's some variation. You don't have to use pre-bid. You can use a different wrapper or a wrapper or whatever, but it's basically pretty static. And one of the problems that prevents further innovation is GAM. So there's no competition in the publisher ad server market. You have to use GAM. They have 90% or more market share. And also, you can't get off GAM. So you have to use GAM, because if you get off GAM, you also don't get AdX in real time. You can get AdX static bids, but that's no good. And as a result, there's no innovation going on the publisher side. There's a couple of answers to your question. So in the short term, the only thing that we could expect to change, I think, is what the IAB's server-side rendering project is kind of the biggest tech innovation. It's very early. It's not really clear exactly how much it's going to be adopted, but effectively the IAB has put out an open source program that would allow you to not just move pre-bid to be a server-side implementation, but effectively allow your entire website to be rendered server-side and just show up for the end user as a blob of HTML and JavaScript, which would have a pretty big advantage on latency. It would reduce the power of the browsers to block ads and do other things like that. So that's a pretty interesting technical innovation. Like I said, I can't really prognosticate how likely it is to be adopted, but that's the biggest thing on the horizon. The other part of this is if the GAM monopoly is ended. And there are a couple flavors of how that might work. Is it just that AdX bids into pre-bid, or if it's spun out, or if GAM is spun out? There's a lot of variations that's probably beyond the scope of this call. But the important point is, if that happens, you could get rid of your ad server. So especially if, maybe not for News Corp, but for a low sell-through publisher, which the majority are, you could probably get away with just pre-bid and then have some new pre-bid adapter that does reservations and forecasting, which would be really interesting. It'd be a lot faster, a whole lot faster, and would give a lot more flexibility. So I think that's very likely. That's likely to happen if publishers are able to get out from under the thumb of Google.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess we, should touch on the DOJ trial a little bit then. You guys have obviously been following this quite closely. I've been following the Monopoly Report newsletter. I guess it's a big question, but what, if you could, for the listeners out there who may not be keeping up to it, kind of give a summary of how that's gone over the last few weeks.
Yeah. So the first part is Google's already been found to be a monopoly by the courts. So what we did over the last couple of weeks, or I didn't do anything, I just sat there, was that there was an argument between the plaintiffs, the DOJ, and the states, and Google about what should be done. What's the remedy? I'm not. There's a lot to it, but the basic is first of all, Google is very likely to have AdX bid into pre-bid. So Google has already almost accepted that, and the DOJ wants it too. And that's really good news for publishers because if you want, they could still bid into DFP directly. But if you wanted to go into pre-bid, you'd have a single auction. You wouldn't have the unified pricing rules that Google imposed on people years ago. You would have a single log file with all of your demand sources. It would be good. Everyone would be happy about that. The second thing is this question about whether AdX and AdWords would be divorced in some way. So AdWords, otherwise known as Google Ads, is the primary source of demand in AdX. So you could almost think of AdX as just a wrapper around Google Ads. 70% of the money you make in AdX is from Google Ads. And there's no way to get that right now except through AdX. So if Google has its way, it'll continue that way, and you'll be forced to use AdX no matter what. And AdX has got a lot of problems with it, mainly that it takes a 20% take rate, which is really high. If, on the other hand, the plaintiffs have their way, AdWords will be forced to bid in a non-discriminatory fashion, meaning that that money would go to Programmatic and Rubicon and Index and anywhere else that offers the inventory for sale. And that would be a really big deal because it would mean the fees would go down. You might have more innovation. You might have a lot of other things that happen. So those are the two things to watch. And then the big story is whether there's a forced divestiture of AdX, which I'm kind of deprioritizing that right now. First of all, because it would take years, like many, many years. But secondly, because I'm personally a little pessimistic that the government's going to order it. And it's not as meaningful as just getting the AdX demand somewhere else. That's the real most meaningful thing. So we'll find out the final answer, before appeals sometime in early 2026, probably January, February would be my guess. And then we'll have more conversations about what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I was paying attention to, and one of the interesting points that was made in the newsletter was if a possible GAM divestiture was to happen, what the flow-on effects would be to publishers around, the cost of the platform and the, DFP for small business because, of all of the cost of all that is offset on the Google side, subsidized by AdX and Google Ads, right? So if that does happen, what is the effect on publishers? And I guess your point earlier around that pre-bid wrapper, not having an ad server and having a pre-bid wrapper that can do that kind of reservations. I mean, we've fantasized about a solution like that on the publisher side for a long time. So I guess that would be a really interesting next step if that pre-bid adapter was to exist. But what are your thoughts on kind of the potential there? I know it's a hypothetical right now, but what that might happen.
Yeah, during the trial, they presented evidence. I may have these numbers wrong, but something like 90% of GAM publishers don't pay for it. Now, that's not by impressions, that's by accounts. But, by accounts might matter more to the judge because she's trying to minimize the harm to the people who are supposedly the trials for. So you have 90% of folks using GAM who don't pay for it and presumably would not pay for it if they were forced to because it would be uneconomical. They're subsidized by AdX. And, one of the counter arguments is like, well, if you're not paying for it, you're the product. And it's like, yeah, who cares? That's a very nice slogan. But in the end, people need an ad server. This is literally the only ad server around, and it's free. What do you want them to do? So it's a tricky wicket, as they say, about what to do with it. I'm sure that competitors like Magnite or Pubmatic would offer some sort of option, free ad serving. The ad serving needs of these like long tail publishers are pretty simple. They don't have complicated, like News Corp level yield management systems. So there would probably be a solution there, but it was very clearly a concern of the judge that she didn't want to do any harm as part of her remedies.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess to move on to a little bit of again, blue sky thinking kind of approach. Like if we were building the ad tech stack from the ground right now without the last 10, 15 years there, how would we do that to best serve publishers and the buy side and everyone in between?
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? It is. It really is. Like when programmatic first was invented, and pretty quickly companies emerged, SSPs and DSPs. Um, there was this assumption that, and I had it as well, that they were going to be software platforms that had normal software economics to them. So, and what I mean by that is that if you were going back to 2006 and you asked like how many SSPs will a publisher like News Corp use in a given country, the answer would be one, right? That makes sense. You know, I need to auction off my inventory. I need a tech vendor that does that for me. I only use one ad server. Why would I have more than one SSP? Yeah, makes sense. Now we all know that did not happen. The average publisher uses 20 SSPs. It's crazy.
You're scaring me. Oh God, help me.
So why didn't it happen? And there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason is that from the publisher's perspective, there's no cost and significant benefit to having more than one SSP. And so it's a tragedy of the commons problem. And you keep adding SSPs, and the buyers have very little control. They have to listen to the QPS in some form, and then they have to bid on it. So it's a pretty messed up market, really. And so, you know, if I was the king of the world and I could just determine what happened, I would just have a 1 cent CPM cost on QPS. That would solve the problem. You know, you basically, every QPS the publisher sends is, you know, they're charged 1 cent and it goes to the government, right? Because that would be a dampener and it would reduce everything. But I don't have that control. So if I had to think of a practical solution for this, you know, it would probably, I'm not sure I have it, but I'll say where we are headed. We're obviously headed to the world where this concept of a duality, DSP and SSP, is gone. And you just have various companies operating ad networks that either are transparent or non-transparent. And there's nothing wrong with being non-transparent as long as you don't lie to anybody. And in the end, the publisher takes the bid that's 1 cent higher, and it doesn't matter which channel it came through. The buyers have a lot of options. The buyers can say, hey, I want to do retargeting with Criteo, and I want to do transparent open web on the trade desk, and also I want to do, you know, app install using AppLovin. And the buyers can put their money where they think the highest ROAS is, but the sellers in the end are going to treat all of these paths as roughly equivalent and just take the one that has a cent higher.
Yeah, I feel like we're in this sort of merry-go-round. We're just coming back to where ad networks are coming back into the fore again through the amalgamation of SSPs and DSPs. And we see OpenPath and you know what Yahoo's doing in that space as well. So it's an amazing time, and I think we're just going through a regrouping period. It feels like that for me, at least, anyway.
Yeah. And what's interesting, while I have the Google lens on, is that Google's effectively been running the strategy for 10 years, but people didn't know it, right? So Google pretended to the outside world that they were participating in two totally separate markets, the SSP market through AdX and the DSP market through both AdWords and DV360. And those were arm's length. They both had their own fee structures. And in the end, yeah, it's just some sort of magic that they tend to transact with each other more than anybody else. And now we've learned through the court cases and et cetera that they were actually manipulating margin between the two like crazy through all these kind of things like dynamic revenue share and other these things they were doing. Once again, not illegal, but the point being they were operating a buy-side, sell-side ad network the entire time, and it was just sort of PR that they weren't, while the rest of the industry was saying, oh, no, we're only on the buy side. We don't care about publishers. You know, probably people should have gotten cynical a lot sooner.
Now, Ari, somebody tells me that you've released a book.
It's true.
Yeah.
You can buy it.
Yeah, good.
I'll hold it up for here. It's kind of hard to see on my background here.
We'll put a shot in for you.
Yeah, exactly. Put a shot in. It's called Yield.
It's called Yield. It's a good read, by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, I want to start this off by saying for anybody that is interested in ad tech media in the digital space, this is, I would consider, the best 101 or intro into the digital media space. The historical look back that you've got and the insights. I've never come across anything like this before. It's amazing. You describe yield management in the book as a dirty business of squeezing every penny out of content. Why has yield been historically undervalued yet so powerful?
Well, ultimately, publishers really are in the business of just making money on their content. So content is like an airline seat, and it flies away. And if you hadn't sold the tickets, it's a missed opportunity. So publishers are managing that yield to the very last drop. And the same way, it's annoying if you're on an airline and you pay twice as much for your ticket as the guy next to you. It's not that different in this world where, you might have the premium inventory you bought at Cannes and the, global deal you put out a press release on. And then right next to you is like an ad for a, belly fat loss. 10 cents. So it is a pretty dirty business.
Yeah. Look, in the early days with Google and the publisher relationship, you described a moment in the book where trust is gone forever. What broke that relationship, and can it ever be rebuilt, do you think?
Yeah. This is sort of my dramatic opening to the book, because it was dramatic. It really happened. It really was dramatic. Google acquired DoubleClick in 2008, and over the next 10 years, they just killed it. Like they killed it in a good way. I'm using a slang expression. They grew AdX from 0 to majority market share. They grew DV360 from a small acquisition of Invite Media to #1 DSP. DFP went from like 60% market share to 90% market share. And while they were doing this, and frankly, they're making people money, and they were, they did a lot of good things. They were increasingly pushing people around and being arrogant and bullying and not taking feedback from their customers. And they ran a second price auction far longer than everybody else. Everyone else moved to first price. They refused to for a long time. And so in, I want to get the dates right, I think 2018, they decided, and we have the email, so we know what happened internally. They decided to try to fix it all. They said to themselves, this whole programmatic world is messed up, which was true. and they had they knew that in some cases, like, you could have the highest bidder in various auctions not win, because if you're in a second price with Google and you're in a first price with the header, it might reduce in a way that's not beneficial. So there were some real problems with the whole auction. So they said, let's fix this. First, they said, we're going to move to a first price auction. Yay, everyone wanted that. Secondly, they were going to get rid of this one last advantage they had called last look, which was where they could basically see the highest bid from pre-bid and bid 1 cent higher. Great. Everyone loves this. This is great. This is sounding like a great release. And then the AdX team comes into this conversation, or maybe it was the AdWords team, and they say, we've noticed that very often it seems as though we have the highest bid, but we're not winning. And it seems to be because publishers are setting the floor price in GAM too high, or in AdX too high. And that was true. Publishers were doing that. Publishers would set, like, let's say every other exchange has $1 floor price in GAM, then they'd log into AdX, which was a separate system, and they would set it to $1.10, and they would make more money because they knew Google would be bidding more, and it was just yield management, right? And so Google convinced themselves that they were going to help everybody by removing this capability. They called it unified pricing rules. And basically it said you could change the price based on certain parameters, like the brand, like, Ford gets a higher price than General Motors. But by exchange, no, you can't do that. And why? Because we know better. Like, literally, they're saying we know better how auctions work than these dumb publishers that are our customers. And and there were some internal emails where they were like, "Are we sure this is a good idea? Because I'm getting some negative feedback. Like, it doesn't seem like people are really going to like this." And like, yes, must announce it all together. It's going to be great. And so they brought everyone to the New York office, which is in Chelsea, near where I live, and there's all these like very senior ad ops people from all the big publishers, and they told them the news, and it was like a riot. It was like the angriest ad ops people get. They were just sort of like, "You're a monopoly. Why are you doing this? You just think this decision's already been made, and you're looking for our feedback." And the most dramatic thing is that the audio recording exists and was played in court. It was like, you think antitrust trials can be the most boring thing ever. And the Department of Justice puts an audio recording of these people, these angry ad ops people yelling at the Google people. It's pretty great. It's still available online if you want to listen to it. So that's the breaking point. And it's really kind of a straight line from there to antitrust court. And that's kind of a lesson for big corporations everywhere. Don't piss off your customers.
How do you, like, the amount of information that you've got access to and that you've used to quote in this book, and you've just mentioned an audio recording, how do you get access to that? And is that something that you have called on? I know you give a number of credits at the end of the book as well. Is that where the sources are, or have you just the most amazing memory for recording all of this sort of thing?
Well, no, the memory is wrong. Like, that's been the fun thing about writing the book. I would write the first draft out of memory, and then I would go to the footnotes and be like, oh, that didn't happen at all. Or it happened in a totally different order, more likely. The book there's two primary sources. One is the court cases. So there's thousands of documents that I have access to that are public. You just need to know how to find them. And then in-person interviews. I did 70 interviews with various executives and people in the industry. And some of the people who testified, some didn't, some anonymized because they weren't allowed to talk, but they talked sort of behind the scenes. And I got all kinds of juicy details out of folks. And then I turned it into a narrative and used secondary sources where necessary to fill in the blanks. I got a couple things wrong. I feel bad about that. Mostly I misspelled a couple people's names. But
I heard about that.
Joe Zawadzki has two Z's in there. Did you know there are two Z's? I didn't know that. Yeah, I thought I checked too.
Yeah, mind you, it's a hard one as well. Anyway,
it is.
Now, looking at DoubleClick versus Google versus Microsoft, the book reads like a corporate thriller. What do today's ad tech leaders not understand about that era?
Well, first of all, it's easy to forget that Yahoo was the most important company in digital media for 10 years, right? It's so easy to dismiss them now because they're, probably number 5 or 6 in the leaderboard of digital media. But they were so overwhelmingly important back then that all digital media went through them, X search. And when Google was coming up and, Google had this IPO, they grew like, I have the numbers in my book, but something like 80-90% revenue growth year over year after their IPO. It was crazy how search was growing. And they had no clue in anything besides search. Their banner ad program was just nascent at best. It was bad. They didn't have cookies, so you couldn't frequency cap. So they're running a banner ads with no frequency caps across millions of dollars of media. So it was not clear at that time who was going to win. Like, there was a very good argument you could make that Microsoft would be the new Google. And if they had not, mismanaged several times what they did, it's very possible that Microsoft could have been the dominant display partner of the open web instead of where they ended up, which was
do you think the market would be different if Microsoft, instead of Google, were playing the big ad server and DSP space?
Yeah, I think one thing is that the good thing about Google winning is that Google had access to this long tail of millions of advertisers who otherwise probably would never have bought display. Microsoft didn't have a really viable way to get to that long tail at the time, and Bing wasn't even out yet. So they were much more like Yahoo, probably the couple thousand advertisers total globally, which makes a big difference. The other thing is that Microsoft often tried to combine their ad units with their other products. So the Windows Desktop, the Zune, the Xbox, et cetera. They tried so many times and it never really worked, but it could have worked. And it didn't. So I'm not sure what else I could prognosticate there, but that's a real big difference there.
Now, you argue that owning an ad server equals to owning the market in 2025. Is that still true, or has identity or data become the new control point?
Well, the ad server is only really relevant in open web, right? In app is a very close cousin to open web, and there's no ad servers in app. They are irrelevant. GAM is available in app if you have inventory to sell, but it's not very powerful because the supply demand imbalance is different in that it's a very long tail of apps right? But very little direct sold. So the app market's overwhelmingly just ad networks, mediation, things like that. And so it turned out totally differently. Video also ended up different. So the TV market, the dominant ad server is Freewheel, great product. People, has a lot of loyalty, but they have not been able to take their ad server position and turn it into a dominant, transactional marketplace. They're probably a, relatively smaller player in the exchange market for video. And that's because the customers didn't want them to be, more or less. So it might be that, the ad server plus Google was a unique combination that was just a one-off, that the dominant ad server and the largest source of demand in the world came together like chocolate and peanut butter, as they say. But maybe that's an Americanism.
I have not tried it, though. I haven't tried it.
It's so good. Yeah, people outside the U.S. don't eat peanut butter. I always forget. But you could say imagine if the court requires a spin out of GAM. You have this big problem of who's going to buy it and not reproduce the monopoly. Because if you have 90% market share of publishers, and you could say to them, we said earlier that publishers just want 1 cent higher, right? So anyone who buys them could say, okay, well, you have to use our demand to get that 1 cent higher. Like Amazon could use their DSP only bids into the ad server, and suddenly the monopoly is reproduced and the publishers are screwed again. So it's pretty problematic.
Yeah.
And I guess who?
Sorry, mate. Go for it.
I guess who do you think? As you said earlier, Yahoo was a dominant player in the space earlier. I remember the days of having a Yahoo email address when I was probably 12. So I'm not going to repeat the email address online. But
I still have mine.
I think I've still got mine. I just send all my junk mail to that. But
I've still got my Hotmail address.
So actually, I still have that too. So who do you think? I mean, you've got Amazon, who has been pushing kind of building a lot more of those, web services and products on the ad tech side. Steph Laser over there, who I worked with at News Corp. Then Microsoft, acquiring the Xandr products and what they've been kind of doing with those. I believe Xandr DSP is being wound down. And then, Yahoo's obviously taken a step back over the years. Do you still think Google's going to be the dominant player regardless of what happens in the DOJ trial, or do you see Amazon, definitely Amazon, but Microsoft playing a bigger part in the industry?
Well, yeah. So on the buy side, Amazon's the number 3 DSP and growing quite rapidly, and I think they see that as a big opportunity because, in general, the buy side is more profitable than the sell side for vendors. It has a stickier relationship. It's not infinitely competing like in the header bidding environment. So I think they're going to continue doing that. On the sell side, it's a tricky question because I think we all know that the sell side for display is stagnant or declining. The volume is just declining. AI is making that worse. So you don't expect to see a lot of new investment in a declining market. And you have this whole legal morass where Google's not going to settle, but they also don't care about the business. They're just stubbornly going to hold on to it for as long as possible. So it's really kind of a messy situation. I wouldn't expect some white knight to show up with some great innovation that beats Google anytime soon. I think it's much more likely people just spend a lot less attention on it and start spending more attention on areas they monetize better, that they control more, like podcasting and email newsletters and in-app, and while display is kind of, seen better days.
Ari, where do you get the time to do all of this? Because it's a considerable chunk, not just bringing in Marketecture, obviously listening to the podcast with Marketecture doing so well. You've moved out of the CEO role. You've obviously got the book. I'm trying to figure out where you squeeze the extra bit of minutes or seconds out.
I don't have a job.
Right.
I don't have a job, man.
Do you need one?
Work harder than I do.
Do you need one?
No, I don't. I'm a bad employee. I'm just. I've been very busy lately. The court stuff is very time consuming. Someone asked me after I got back from Virginia from the court, did you accomplish what you hoped for? And I was like, I didn't I had no goals, so I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure what I was trying to accomplish. I'm enjoying myself. That's probably as much as I can say right now. Marketecture is a really healthy business. We brought Jeremy Bloom, who was our CRO, is now the CEO. He's an exec from TubeMogul and Adobe. We have a big event coming up in a couple weeks in New York. We're going to do really big events in 2026. So, we think we could bring some fresh air to the B2B media space and advertising, sort of like you guys, something new, different, exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned Google acquiring ad tech platforms and then doing nothing with them. And if I want to quote you correctly out of the book, talking about parking these platforms, that implies new internal strategy decisions after acquisition. How do you uncover Google's post-acquisition intentions in these spaces?
Well, I was there for some of it. So this book, some of it came from my memory. So I was part of the team that acquired Invite Media, and which turned into DV360. And at the time, I think that was a great example of where we knew on day one we were going to rewrite it from scratch. There was no chance we were going to use even a line of code from Invite, because it was sort of this cobbled together mess. But we also wanted to keep the revenue coming and the momentum because they were doing really, really well. So that was the strategy. It's like keep keep Invite going, grow it, and then build the replacement full steam ahead. And that's really a great strategy if that's what you want to do. The thing you're referencing is AdMeld, and AdMeld was super weird.
There we go.
AdMeld was weird.
That's another throwback.
Yeah. So, and I feel like the court was also pretty confused about what happened here. So the story is the color to this. Everyone knows the basic story, but the color is more interesting, which is Google AdX was being rebuilt from DoubleClick AdX, and the vision that Neil Mohan, who's now the CEO of YouTube, but at the time was head of display for DoubleClick, had was that all indirect demand, meaning all ad networks, should bid into AdX, and he should take the 20%. And that the ad network model of tags and the ad server was antiquated and was going away. And he was probably right about that, but he wasn't right about the timing. It was happening much more slowly than anyone wanted it to happen. And as a result, AdX was not growing very quickly in those days. And instead, the competitors, Rubicon Project, PubMatic, and AdMeld were the three main competitors. Index wasn't really a player just yet. Were offering publishers this combined product. It did yield management of ad networks, tag-based ad networks, and it also did RTB, which was brand new. And it made publishers a lot of money, and publishers loved them. Like, publishers loved AdMeld. And they didn't love Google AdX at the time. They're like, yeah, it's fine. It works for some remnant crap, but like AdMeld makes me money. And they were starting to say, well, let's take the AdX tag and put it in AdMeld, and let's just have a single tag. So DFP, single tag to AdMeld. AdMeld makes the call out to AdX, and that is Google's worst nightmare, is being intermediated by some other company that doesn't control margins and all that stuff. So long story short, Google decides to buy. The emails say, let's buy one of them. But it's pretty clear which one they preferred, AdMeld, because AdMeld had the most big, like, DFP style publishers using it. And then Neil Mohan says in that email, and we're going to park it. And so what does that mean, right? What does park it mean? And so from an antitrust perspective, if you're a suspicious lawyer and you see that, what do you think? You think, oh, I'm stifling competition. That park it means I'm going to take the best company in this space and just like put it out to pasture, like those guys on the roof in Silicon Valley, the TV show, right? They just rest invest, get rid of it. And the counter argument, what Neil said on stand and several other people have told me, is that it really was what they did for Invite. It was like, let's just keep it running while we replace it. That's what they meant by park it. And so what ends up happening is actually fascinating, because like nothing happens, like basically is the punchline here. They acquire it for a lot of money. I think it was like $450 million, whatever. It's changed everyone's lives. It was a huge amount of money. And then like over the course of time, while they're acquiring it and afterwards, RTB starts growing so rapidly that it kind of doesn't matter. It just disappears. They take a couple of features from AdMeld, add them to AdX, They take the team, which probably mattered more than anything else, put them on the AdX side. They create private marketplace deals, which didn't exist at the time, and then they just shut it down, and no one notices. No one cares. It's just like AdMeld went from everyone, from the darling of the space, everyone's favorite company, to not existing in a year. And Google took all their market share, and no one cared. And in the case, the plaintiffs tried to make this into this big antitrust brouhaha, and in the judge's final ruling, she said there was nothing illegal there. So I don't know. It's a story about nothing, but it's kind of interesting.
It's mad. Absolutely. Just crazy. It just blows my mind. Ari, look, Yield, the book that you have written and released about how Google bought, built, and bullied its way into advertising dominance by our publisher is Amplify. Where can we get that?
You get it on Amazon. You can get it on a bunch of booksellers. Probably not in your local bookstore, especially in Australia. But if you're looking for it, you can go to my personal website, aripaparo.com, and I have a bunch of links to different bookstores that offer it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really great conversation.
Perfect. Thank you. Ari Paparo, Markitecture co-founder and author. Thank you very much for appearing on the show with us. We look forward to catching up with you soon, and all the best for the book.
Absolutely.
Wow, what an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed that one. Thank you, Ari, for your time. It was really enjoyable, having my mind cast back to the early days of my career in the industry, 2011, 2012, going back through DFP ad server migration back then and reliving those memories and some of the names that got thrown out there, AdMeld, and talking about Yahoo business and who the dominant players in the market now. That was great. And obviously touching on the DOJ trial and getting his insights on that. So, yeah, it was awesome. The amount of insights there. I've got a lot to take away from this and a lot to think about and a lot to let things sit in for a little bit. What did you think, David?
Yeah, look, agree with you, Luckett. To have somebody of his stature on the show and caliber is next level. But I think just the openness and opportunity to have a really frank conversation with him. And I think that's just testament to somebody who's been in the industry for such a long time, has really solidified and positioned himself in a way that, he can just focus on the things that interest him, which is exactly what he said. He doesn't need to work, which is wonderful. Wouldn't that be amazing? I want to be in that space. Oh, yeah. don't tell the boss. Okay. Look, I think for everybody out there, this book, Yield, how Google bought, built, and bullied its way into advertising dominance. If you are serious about working in digital media, this should be your Bible. Definitely have a read if you want to have a listen. It's an audio book with Ari reading it as well. It's quite personal in that respect. As Ari said, you can download it or purchase it through Amazon. Highly recommended. Definitely do yourself a favor. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, by the way. Do yourself a favor. Truly Australian, and that's what this show is all about. Thanks everyone for watching the show today. We look forward to having you again next time on Media Tech Talk.